What's up, Red Tree? Hopefully your experience of Holy Week has been a blessing and your experience of Good Friday last night was life-giving. I've always thought the Saturday between Good Friday and Easter Sunday is a weird time. I wanted to do just a quick devotional thought for us. I feel like especially in light of everything going on, this might just hit home for you guys like it did for me. There's this strange little text in Matthew 27. It says this: "The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, 'Sir, we remember how that impostor said while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise. Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first.' Pilate said to them, 'You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can.' So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard." I think it's a strange text because it shows us something super interesting. The religious leaders are concerned that Jesus' followers might not let the movement die with Jesus. They're concerned that they might have taken Jesus at his word and try to stage some sort of false resurrection. This is strange on a ton of levels, some of which we'll talk about tomorrow. But I think the most interesting one is this: they couldn't have read the disciples more wrongly. They were not plotting. They were hiding. John 20:19 tells us they were hiding for their fear. They felt defeated. The messianic claims were common enough that this was not the first time Jerusalem had dealt with something like this. Now, it's unlikely that any before Jesus had such a following, but he was not the first one to claim to be the Messiah. Jesus had failed in the eyes of the world. He had died a humiliating death. His followers had abandoned him. They were not plotting, waiting, expecting. They were despairing. This is our temptation, isn't it? When things don't go according to plan. I don't know about you guys, but I find that oftentimes it's just so easy to move to despair. How could any good come from this? How could God claim to be in control when things are falling apart like this? How could God be good if this is what's happening? This is where our minds naturally go. Or at least it's where my mind naturally goes. It's definitely where the disciples were. All was darkness. And I think that's the essence of the Saturday between Good Friday and Easter. Darkness. When you're sitting in the dark, you don't know what's going on. How can you? How can you know where to go from there? You're stuck. It's dark. You can't see. This was the disciples on Saturday, and this is so often us. I would say this is likely a good amount of us right now. This world, this year, this time has not turned out how we expected it to turn out. Things are uncertain. They're scary. Some of us feel like we are stuck in the darkness right now. But when things are their darkest, we are invited to remember that God is working even when we can't see him working. So that's the thing about darkness, is that you can't see what's going on. And yet, even when things are their darkest, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, circumstantially, the gospel tells us that Christ is still our hope, still our light. Even as the disciples were hunkered down in dark rooms waiting to see what would happen, thinking their life was over, thinking things couldn't get any worse. Jesus was doing the work of saving the universe. Everything seemed lost. Everything seemed dark. But Christ was still light. Christ was still hope. There's a text in 2 Corinthians 12 that says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly in my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." So, beloved of Jesus, as some of you sit in the dark of your current circumstances, wondering what's next, wondering how things could possibly get better, sitting in the dark with the disciples on Saturday, I would encourage you, remember, your Jesus is working. And as long as Jesus is working, there is hope. And as long as there is hope, there can be light.